All right, I think I am live. Yes, I am live. Okay, right then. I every so often I will go on YouTube and do a live thing. This time, because it's coming up to Halloween, I thought what I would do is because a lot of people have been asking me, what are the strangest things you've ever investigated over the years? So I thought I'd mention a couple of them as it's coming up to Halloween. Sorry, by the way, I haven't been making any new films for some while, but I've been so totally tied up with stuff, investigating various new ideas. But now I can start to put some new films together that I'll start to post here over the next few months. Anyway, right. One of the very strangest things that I've encountered, or a place, should I say, is Abbots Bromley, which is a village in the centre of England. If you go to the centre of England, you see the city of Birmingham. It's not that far north of there, not far from a town called Uttoxeter. Anyway, it's a little village surrounded by countryside, and it's steeped in the tradition of the legends of Robin Hood. For example, most people know the village because every year on September, I think it's one of the first Mondays in September, it's called Wakes Day. They have this kind of Robin Hood pageant. Local people from the village dress up in medieval costume, and some of them are those from the story of Robin Hood. There's a little boy who plays the part of Robin Hood, and he dresses up as him and has a bow and arrow, and you've got a man playing the part of Maid Marian, dressed up in a medieval woman's dress and made up. You have other characters from the Robin Hood story. You also have the main dancers known as the horn dancers, and have these great antler horns that they carry around and do this dance throughout the streets of the village and the surrounding area. It goes on all day. It's quite exhausting for them. You've got people playing music, somebody with a drum, somebody with an accordion and various other instruments. And you have a character dressed up as the fool, as Mr. Punch, if you like. Now, the thing about this is, if anyone's ever seen The Wicker Man, the film, the original one with Christopher Lee and Edward Woodward, you'll remember that they do this thing where they all dress up in old-fashioned costume. Somebody is dressed as the fool, somebody else is as a woman, a man dressed as a woman. That's in that case, it's the Christopher Lee character, and you have these dancers. And this sort of thing was traditional going right back. It probably based on something that was way before Christianity. And these various characters, like the fool, the Lord of Misrule, represents the forces of nature that ancient early people were trying to control. But the idea in The Wicker Man is that these people have reintroduced these ancient rites and end up sacrificing the character played by Edward Woodward so that they can have a good harvest. But a lot of this is based on, not necessarily the sacrifice, or that may have happened in the past, but a lot of it is based on traditions of people in villages doing this kind of, these dressing up things, going way back. But the one at Abbots Bromley has been uninterrupted there, going back every year to the Middle Ages, the early Middle Ages. It is being recorded. And it is basically one of the earliest one of these kind of pageants, if you want to call it that, to feature the story of Robin Hood. Now, how did Robin Hood get involved in it over there in Staffordshire, where it is, which is a bit of a distance from Nottingham, where Robin Hood is supposed to have originated? Well, when in the time that Robin Hood is set, the Middle Ages, some of the stories set him around about in the 1190s. Others set him a bit later. But at this particular time, Sherwood Forest, where Robin is supposed to be active, stretched all the way from Nottingham to what's now Staffordshire. And right on the edge of Sherwood Forest was what is now the village of Abbots Bromley. So it was in the area of the Robin Hood story back then. I mean, that forest, there's only some small parts of it left now around Nottingham. So I suppose from Nottingham to Uttoxeter and to Abbots Bromley is probably 60, 70 miles as the crow flies. But that is, I mean, that might seem not very far by American standards, but for the English, it's quite a way. But anyway, that was the size of the forest, which by English standards was huge. The biggest forests today are nowhere near that sort of size. So that is why the Robin Hoods thing comes into it. There's a lot of, why was Robin Hood specifically associated with Abbots Bromley? Well, this is something most of the books won't tell you. There's a place right there next to Abbots Bromley called Loxley. And in the stories, Robin is supposed to have come from Loxley before he was outlawed into Sherwood Forest. And there you have the story is remembered. You've got a Victorian monument there called Robin Hood's Folly, which is said to have replaced an earlier monument. It's like a sort of gazebo made out of stone. And it was supposed to have replaced an earlier such a monument that was there in at least the 1600s, where it was associated with Robin Hood. So in what way, we don't know. Right near there is a tree under which Robin is said to have married Maid Marian in legend. You have a castle there, Chartley Castle, in which a number of the early stories have Robin hiding. And you have other things in the area that remember the Robin Hood story. There was a pub there called the Robin Hood, which strangely was burnt down one Christmas Day. They say it was arson. It's now been levelled. And there was a Maid Marian's well that somebody filled in with concrete. It does seem as if somebody doesn't want Robin Hood to be in that area. But returning to the weirdness of that area, I was in that area basically investigating the Robin Hood legend. That's what I was doing there. But the first really strange thing that happened to me, and for those of you who've read the book Strange Fate, the book that I wrote with Jodie Russell, you'll know that quite often these weird, mysterious kind of universe shifts seem to happen. I mean, I don't know if it's that or if some people suddenly lose their memory about things, or if I don't know how to explain what these are. They're sort of like the kind of thing that you might find in John Keel's books about Mothman and stuff like that, where people suddenly find themselves in the wrong place. If you remember the Mothman Prophecies, the film, the Richard Gere character suddenly finds himself miles away from where he was supposed to be and can't work out how he got there. Well, what happened when I was in the village of Loxley, which has got to be 5 miles to the northwest of where 5 miles to the west of where Abbots Bromley is. And I was looking for in this wood for Robin Hood's Folly. Now it's in this wood. If you ever go to Loxley in Staffordshire, you'll find there's a school in the middle of it, and Loxley School, and behind that there's a wood. And if you go into that wood, it's open to the public and walk through there. Somewhere in there is the actual what remains of Robin Hood's Folly. It's still there, but when I was walking originally trying to find it, I turned left and went the wrong way. So I'm heading in the direction of Abbots Bromley, but Abbots Bromley's got to be 5 miles away. So I carried on walking down this path, and I could not. I mean, everything seemed completely normal. Then the wind suddenly started up. I was actually going live on Facebook at the time, or was it YouTube? One of them anyway. I was going live. No, it was Facebook. I was going live, and it should still be on my Facebook page somewhere. And I was going live, trying to telling people I was looking for Robin Hood's Folly. And let's see if we can find it. I had never been there. I'd only seen old photographs of it. And when I was going through this wood, this breeze of this wind starts up. Then one or two of the people who are watching me suddenly said that there were strange things happening to their feed but that's not unusual. It might be that I was out of range, but I've been up there since, and the reception is perfectly good for Wi-Fi, whatever you data usage thing. Anyway, so this wind started up, and then I didn't know there was a lot of old leaves blowing around, and I suddenly got blinded a bit by some dust that blew in my eyes. And when I'd sort of kind of cleared my eyes, I seemed to be in a slightly different place, but I tried to work out, there was like 3 or 4 different paths going off. So I thought, well, I'll carry on going where I am. And then within about 5 minutes, so I couldn't have been any more at this point than a mile from where I started up at Loxley, where I'd left the car. And I'm suddenly end up down a pathway that arrives in the churchyard that I suddenly recognized as the churchyard in Abbots Bromley. That I came, if ever you go there, there's the churchyard behind the church, and at the bottom of the little hill with all the gravestones on it, there's a little bridge that goes over a stream and a path that goes up through some houses and then through some woodland behind the church. And I'd ended up coming down there. Well, I know for a fact that that doesn't go to that wood. So how I got there, and yet it's miles away. And no time difference had changed. People had watched this happen. They said the camera had kept cutting out. So I'd got no proof that this was a continual stream. But those who were watching it knew. They said, there is no way you could have got from where you were to there in the time. We're looking at it on a map. So I've got that kind of backup, if you like. And this was just odd. How I got there, I have no idea. I eventually got my way back to where I started, but I had to literally go the long way back, because every time I tried to follow my way up the pathway that I'd come down, I ended up in some middle of some fields, or, I just nowhere near where I was supposed to be. And it took me a couple of hours to get back. So that was the weird thing about Abbots Bromley that had happened to me. But it was later when I went there with Jodie Russell, when we were writing the book Strange Fate, which was all about, it doesn't really matter what it was about, but it included all sorts of weird things that did include investigating time slips and seemingly universe changes and all that kind of weird stuff. And we went back and I tried to follow this path in the wood to see if it would come out behind the church of Abbots Bromley, but it didn't. And we tried it over and over. Eventually we drove down to Abbots Bromley, and we were in the churchyard at this little bridge that goes across this stream where I turned up, being transported to or whatever. And while we were there, we were talking, and suddenly some people started coming down the path. We heard people talking, and it was a family. It was a woman, a middle-aged lady, and I think it was 3 children, 2 boys and a little girl. The little girl must have been about 8, the boys maybe 10, 12, something like that. And they walked past us, and there's a gate there, and Jodie opened the gate, and the gate kind of slams on its own quite often, and she was holding it back to say to the little girl, and the mother was coming through, so, be careful, it slams, I'll hold it open for you. And they took absolutely no notice of her. And I just said, morning or afternoon, whatever it was, not a thing, didn't say a word. And I thought, oh, well, fair enough. And they just kind of acted as if we weren't there. So then what happened that was strange is they sat down on a gravestone and took out a hamper and started to have a picnic. So on a grave, there's an old gravestone there next to it, the grave, and they started having a picnic on the grave. I mean, that just seemed odd to me. But anyway, fair enough. I mean, have a picnic with your ancestors, maybe. But what we went over, and Jodie said that she remembered that hearing that in Victorian times, there was a tradition for people to, on a Sunday afternoon, actually have a picnic at their deceased loved ones' graves. I mean, it's quite a nice idea, really. But so we thought, well, let's ask them if they're doing this. And we went over and we started talking to them, and they completely ignored us. They weren't being funny. They weren't being strange. They didn't look at us they just looked through us as if we were not there. And it was the oddest thing. I mean, I wanted to, but you can't really just film a load of people without their permission. But I said, oh, whose grave is this, by the way? Didn't say anything. Not a word, but they weren't being strange. They weren't acting odd. The kids were running around as if like nothing was going on. The mother was there, sort of, I don't know what she was doing, talking to one of the boys or something. She just didn't look up. When she did, she looked around. She was like quite a friendly face. It was just odd. But then what happened is they eventually sort of went back up this little pathway they'd gone to. We've tried to follow them up there, and we couldn't find out where they'd gone. So they'd obviously vanished back into some other universe or something. I mean, that was just very, very strange. And it was only later that we found out that this place, this churchyard, is said to have been haunted by a family who are seen to be having a picnic on a grave. Now, the people we saw were in modern contemporary clothes, but it is said to be the family of a Victorian family, mother, father, and some children who are seen to be picnicking on a grave by people over the years. That's the ghosts in the churchyard. It's quite a fascinating ghost story. But we didn't see Victorian people, but we certainly saw people having a picnic on a grave, which incidentally later we discovered was a Victorian tradition in many places. Apparently it still is in Ireland, somebody told me. And but what we saw was a modern family doing it who didn't seem to have any knowledge that we existed. It's a pity we didn't sort of try and put a hand through them to see if they were really there, but they didn't see us. And okay, none of this can be proved to be supernatural, but it's all very weird. So I would say that's one of the weirdest things. So it's the town of Abbots Bromley. There are other things about this, well, I say town, a village of Abbots Bromley, which are weird. And that is over the years, when various people have been there, they've come back and said, I'm sure that pub was in a different place the last time I was there, or I'm sure that this was different. Okay, people have different memories, and I certainly very often go to a place and tend to remember it the opposite way round, like a kind of reverse image of what it really was. So that may not be too strange. But years ago, myself and Jodie and others went to Abbots Bromley to see this dancing that they do. But we had thought at the time that this horn dance, as they call it, with these people who dress up in this Robin Hood thing and hold these antlers, we thought that was on May Day, but it isn't. It's, as I said, later in the year in September. But we turned up and they had Morris dancers there instead, you know, the ones that have sticks and handkerchiefs that they wave around or whatever they are, traditional English dancing. So this was going on, and Jodie got chatting to the Morris people, and they said, oh, you can be the Queen of the May, because the actual Queen of the May, the person who's supposed to be the girl they put flowers around her hair and stuff, hadn't turned up. So Jodie ended up being the Queen of the May, and we got photographs of this, and that was fun. Anyway, we went for a drink with them afterwards in the pub, and you know, so great. The next year we went back, and Jodie was over again from the States, and we thought, not just us two, there was others that we were taking there too, who had been there the previous time. And we said, let's go there and see if these Morris dancers are there again. They were good fun. When we turned up, no sign of a Morris dance. Again, it's May Day. And we went into the pub where we'd been with the Morris dancers the year before. And behind the bar, the guy said, no Morris dancers here. I said, what? He said, no Morris dancers in here. He said, well, there was some last year. He says, we have the horn dancing in September, but nothing now. But you had Morris dancers here. They said they come every year. No, nothing about it. So we basically thought that it must be this guy just didn't want us in there. He didn't want to talk about this. So we went to the pub opposite. They didn't know anything about it either. And they were convinced that they said, no, there's no such thing as Morris dancing. It was a couple of years later when we just put it down and said, well, they obviously don't want to talk about it. They don't want us there or whatever. But a year or so later, again on May Day, went back and there were tons of Morris dancers. I mean, like about a group of Morris dancers is called a side, by the way. It's spelled she, but it's pronounced side, I believe. So, but I'll just say a troop of Morris dancers because it's easier. But there was must have been like 20 different troops of Morris dancers, men and women dancers, all there from different parts of the country, involved in a kind of pageant, or there was almost like a competition going on between them. And they were all there. And we went into this same pub, said to the same guy that owned the place, you know, oh, we were here last year and you said there was no dancers, but look at them all. We always have dancers here, loads. But one time there was only one lot of dancers. Now they always come every year. It's tradition from all over the country. So I've got footage of these people. I've got film and still images and video, and so have others, of these dozens of Morris teams. And there was like loads of them, and the whole town was decked out with stalls selling various stuff. And cutting a long story short, we spoke to people after that, and they said, "Nah, there's never Morris stuff goes on in Abbots Bromley." We went back the following year. Nobody knew anything about it. And I've talked to people who live at Abbots Bromley, just ordinary people, not the people in the pub who may have decided they didn't want us in there. And they had no memory of all this Morris dancing on May Day. And I've still got all the video to prove it. So that's an ongoing thing. I have shown videos and footage of this to various people in Abbots Bromley to say, look, there is a universe here somewhere in which you have Morris dancing, or you all forget it or something. And they've been really freaked out when I was showing it. They said, oh, you've just doctored that. You've messed around with Paint Shop Pro. But, you know, this was years ago, before they had things like Paint Shop Pro. Now you can fake anything, but this isn't faked. I mean, even by today's standards, you'd find it very hard to fake this moving video, people dancing around their village. But now they say, nah, it's just fake. But anyway, so it's all part of a bigger investigation that I'm doing now about these kind of places where the world seems to change, which is all going to be in a new book that I'm doing. So I won't go into it too much, but there is one other really weird thing that happened to me, which again doesn't really come in under the sort of subject of ghosts and hauntings, but and it's not even a different universe. I have no idea what this is. Once when I lived in Coventry in Warwickshire in East Central England, and this was going back for years. And right next to Coventry is this really nice hilly area, quite a large area for England, called the Cotswolds, hills with old villages, and it's really scenic. It's like people imagine old Victorian Britain to look like. And it's also there that the town of Stratford is, where Shakespeare was born. And there was some guy I knew who went to a college in Coventry, went to the university there, and I knew him through a friend, and he said that he was going during his break, whatever they call it, study week or something from college. He wanted to go down to see his folks who lived in around somewhere down south, and he said, oh, if you're going down, because I happen to be driving down that area anyway. And he said, if you're going down, can you give me a lift? I said, yeah, sure. So I gave him a lift. I know his name. I don't want to mention him in case he doesn't want people to tell. I'll call him Joe for want of a better word. Anyway, so I was with Joe, and how old was he about? I suppose about 22 or something. At that time, I was about 30, something around that. And we were driving. This was nothing to do with paranormal investigation or anything. It's just I seem to find myself in these weird situations. We're driving through the Cotswolds, and we're somewhere in there's all. If anyone who's been there, you'll know it's all little lanes, and you can get lost very easily. And we're driving through this. I'm trying to take a shortcut over there rather than go around via a major road on account of the fact that there was all sorts of roadworks and problems. So I thought this might be quicker, but we were kind of getting lost. And then Joe told me, he said, I used to live around here when I was little. And I said, all right, he said, there's a nice place here. We can have some lunch. I said, great stuff. He said, I'll tell you what, we'll go in there. I'll buy you lunch for taking me down to, give me the lift. So we drove into this little village. And this is the weird thing, I cannot remember what it was called. I think it was called Little something or other, like Little Barton or Little Eastwood or something along those lines. But I've looked and tried to find it since and never been able to find where this is. And we drove into this village and we went into this pub. And this is just an ordinary midweek day. Now, in there, you'd got just, I don't know, you weren't going to get that many people, but when we went in there must have been about, I don't know, 10, 15 people sitting around, probably the older people of the village, rather than anybody, you're not got young people in there going out for a drink. It's just the old people who are not working, retired and whatnot, or maybe some farming people from locally of the area. So we went in and suddenly everybody just went completely quiet and turned around to stare at us. Just if you've seen that film American Werewolf in London, when they go to that pub, The Slaughtered Lamb, and suddenly all these characters sort of get quiet and stare at them because they never have anyone there. That's what it was like. But and it was dark day, so it was pretty spooky for this to be going on. It was an overcast day and the weather wasn't good, and all these weird people staring at us. And I thought, well, it wasn't that far from anywhere. I mean, in England, you can't get that far from anywhere. You can't walk for more than a couple of miles across the countryside before you before you get to a house or before you're on a new road or a village. I mean, it'd be virtually impossible to get yourself lost here unless weird stuff happens to you. But anyway, so this village, so we went in there, just looked at us. So fair enough, went up to the bar and I said, ordered a drink, a pint of lager and whatever he's having or whatever. And at that moment, Joe says, oh, I'm going to make a call. He's got to phone his folks to tell them when he was going to arrive, and there was no phone in the pub anywhere. So he said, oh, he'd seen there was a public phone outside. Remember, this is before cell phones and whatnot. So he went off, and so I went to the bar, and I just, he told me what he wanted me to buy him, and I ordered the drinks. And at this moment, the guy behind the bar says, no. I said, sorry, are you closed? And I looked at my watch, and because pubs in the countryside tend to close in the afternoon, but this is only, just afternoon. I said, are you closed? He says, no, we're open. I said, well, what, why can't I have a drink? I says, I'll serve you, but I'm not serving him. I said, well, he's in England, by the way, you can drink at 18, and he looked like he was 22. He didn't look like he was under the age of drinking. So I said, oh, he's perfectly old enough to drink. He says, well, it's not that. Well, we'll serve you. You look like a decent fellow. We're not serving him. And I said, why? He says, I'll tell you why. He done something. I said, what did he do? I'll tell you what he done. He done something. And he ain't coming in here. And I said, well, okay. And I thought, I'm sure he said that he hadn't been to this village since he was about 10 or 11 or something like that, when he moved away. And I said to these guys, I said, you know him? He says, oh, I know him. That's Joe. And he said the guy's actual name, and he said who he was, and they knew him all right. So it wasn't, because I thought, well, they're mistaking him for somebody else that's, smashed the pub up or something. And when he said his name, his full name, Joe Smith, and I'll call him for now, and he said, we know Joe Smith. And at that point, a load of old guys in the corner playing dominoes suddenly looked up. Joe Smith, oh, Joe Smith. Oh. And I said, what's, as far as I know, he hasn't been here since he was about 11. You know Joe, if you know Joe. I said, well, what's he done? He said, I'll tell you what he's done. Hey, Roger over there, Roger, you come and tell him what he's done. Who was that then? That Joe Smith. Oh, Joe Smith. Well, he says, he's with him here now. We don't want him in here. I said, what's he done? He done something. And that's all they would say. And eventually I said, look, just please, we'll go. He said, I don't want you in here. You look like a decent fellow, but don't have anything to do with him. I said, but he hasn't been here since he was about 11. And he said, he done something. He done something. And I said, please just tell me what he did. And he said, go and speak to old Joe up there. Joe, or whatever his name, Bill or whatever, some old guy up the corner, sort of like, yeah, what is it? Remember Joe Smith? Joe Smith. You tell him. He'll tell you what he done. You want to know what he done? He done something. And I'm thinking, hold on, is this some kind of weird joke? Why? I've never been there before. But all these guys seem completely normal. Anyway, I said, I'll be back in a minute. Went out, and then Joe was coming back in after doing his phone call. And I said, what's all this about? He said he knew nothing about it. He said he hadn't been there since he was 11. He said he was quite happy to go in. He wasn't scared. He wasn't as if he was running away from the place. He said, no, I'll go in there. And we tried to sort of go in, both of us, so we could explain to Joe what was going on, the landlord, and they just bolted the doors on us. And anyway, I went back. We carried on, and Joe was as mystified as I am. He thought I was making it up. I dropped him off, and then on the way back, I went back for it. I tried to look for this place over and over again. And it wasn't until years that I never found it. I've been there with other people. Some of the people that may be watching this now that I know quite well have been with me looking for this little, whatever the name of the place was. And I've been on maps. In more recent years, I've done Google Earth to search the whole area, driving the lanes virtually, and can't find anything that even resembles this place, except for about a couple of years ago now, but way after this had happened. Decades later. I remember hearing somebody on some radio station when I was driving along. I can't remember what it was tuned to now, but somebody talking about mysteries of the Cotswolds, and that apparently there is some village in the Cotswolds that sometimes appears and then disappears, like sort of Brigadoon, the story that, is it Fred Astaire is in? Something like that. Anyway, is it Fred Astaire? Bob Hope, Bing Crosby, something like that. About this village that only appears every 100 years. And if you're stuck in it, when it vanishes, you go. But then, years later, I wanted to sort of find out from this Joe guy, if he knew about it. And I'd lost touch with him. And eventually somebody knew him and we spoke to him. And he then has absolutely no memory of ever being in this place. He said he was, as a child, he spent time in the Cotswolds, but he seemed to sort of be really vague about where this was. So I don't know. It's still kind of like, I never got to the bottom of all this. And I think if somebody was to say to me, what is the strangest of all mysteries that you've ever encountered, it would be the case of the piece of liver in a woman's fridge. This lady that I used to know called Jean, she used to be my personal assistant when I was writing years ago with Martin Keatman, when we were writing our first books, The Greenstone Eye of Fire, and those books. And this lady used to come investigating with us. A lot of people knew her. She was a very sensible, down-to-earth person. And this is a story she told me, and I know it's a friend of a friend story, but it's not an urban legend, because if she's the kind of person that wouldn't just say, she knew a person that it happened to if she didn't. And she said that she knew this lady who lived in this town where she lived, just outside Coventry in Warwickshire, who one day she'd bought a piece of liver from the shop, you know, lamb's liver or whatever, that was kind of on a plate in the fridge. And one morning she came down to find that the liver was off the plate and had wrapped itself around a milk bottle. And this woman apparently got in touch with the health people and said, "What's going on? I've got a piece of liver wrapped around my milk bottle." And then nothing happened for a few hours until these guys in sort of spacesuits, you know, these kind of and hazmat suits turned up at her door, sort of ET style, and basically took this liver away in a kind of like some kind of sealed container, and she never heard from them again. And I said to Jean, "Come on, she's having you on." She said, "No, this lady, I've known her for years, and there was never anything wrong with her." And eventually, I actually knew somebody who knew the woman as well, who claimed, yes, she has been telling this tale for years, and it's the only strange thing that ever happened in her life. So anyway, I'd put that somewhere near the top. So thank you for listening. Let's just have a look to see if anyone has actually put a message up. Oswald, top of the morning, Graham. Top of the morning to you too. Morning from us. Katrina. Hello, Katrina. Paul. Hello, peeps. That's people, I assume, but there's only me here, but other people can presumably see that as well, hopefully. So good. Hello, Paul. Katrina says, curious, yes. Steve Blakemore, just finished Strange Fate last night. Great recount of very odd chain of events. Oh, you only just finished it. That's quite coincidental. Thank you for buying it. Oswald, the musical group Stick in the Wheel has a wonderful music video for Abbots Bromley dance. Oh, I'll look that up. Stick in the Wheel. Okay, I'll look that up. Thank you. And Robin Annette, good morning from America. How fun to wake up to this. I just love to listen to your adventures, Mr. Phillips. Thank you very much, Robin. Okay, well, that's about it. And, wow, I've been rattling on for 37 minutes. That's quite good, I suppose. Okay, thank you for listening, and bye for now. And happy Halloween when it comes around. Now I've got to figure out how to switch this off. There. Bye.